Joining us now is the Minister of the Status of Women, Patty Hajdu. She has recently launched a consultation process on gender-based violence. The first discussion focused on youth and online gender-based violence, and she's also formed an advisory council to help shape a federal strategy to prevent it. Good afternoon, Minister Hajdu.
Hello, Giacomo.
So let's take Timothy's question there. Why is this a gender issue?
Well, the experience of women with gender-based violence is so drastically disproportionate that is why this government is taking it so seriously. As you know, we are firmly committed to gender equality in all areas of life, and unless we actually address the endemic rates of violence that women are experiencing both in real life and online, we are not going to be able to achieve those goals. And so when you look at statistics that say that women are 11 times more likely to be victims of sexual violence or 80% more likely to be victims of domestic violence, that's when we know that we have disproportionate numbers of women that are experiencing violence, not just online, but in real life. And many, many times these experiences of online harassment are extremely gendered in the way that they're presented, but also follow people into real life. So from our perspective, it's the vulnerability of women that has existed since time immemorial that we need to address in order to actually reach the goal of true gender equality.
You're hearing that from people that that transition from online to offline is happening?
Absolutely. I mean, people feel afraid. They feel that individuals have their personal information. They receive very, very specific threats. But even if they don't know, even if they feel that their identity is protected, I mean, this kind of ongoing onslaught of verbal violence, emotional violence, bullying leads to depression, anxiety, withdrawal, isolation, and in some cases, as we know, very high-profile cases, women and girls have taken their own lives. And so this is, as I've been reminded by many of the stakeholders that we've been speaking to across the country, the line between online and real life is increasingly thin. Some would say it doesn't exist anymore at all.
What about the criminal element then? I mean, we do have laws that are supposed to protect us against threats and harassment, even if it's online.
So absolutely, and we know that there are some laws, and that is exactly what we're asking when we're holding these consultations across the country. Are the laws working? Are they strong enough? Do people feel that they have options to take that are legal, that are within an enforcement perspective? Is there something else that we could be doing as a federal government from a legal or an enforcement perspective? But not just that. We're also asking things like, how can we make environments safer for women? How can we actually end this behavior? What kinds of preventative work do we have to do with not just women and girls, but boys and men as well, that start to address this from all of the different perspectives?
Do you want police committing more resources to this, laying more charges?
I want women to be safe. I want Canadian women to feel safe. I want Canadian women to feel safe regardless of what space it is that they wish to exist in, whether it's online, whether it's in a taxi cab, whether it's on the street, whether they're walking home from their dorm. I want women to know that they have the right to be safe in Canada. So from my perspective, whatever resources it's going to take to make women feel that they have an equal access to our public spaces, that is what I want.
When we hear about politicians having consultations and things, how can you reassure us that this will actually lead to something concrete?
Well, I think that's an excellent question, and I know that people are skeptical of consultations. I think one of the things that our government has been very committed to do is to work with civil society, to work with not-for-profit organizations, feminist organizations, various experts and academics to really look at what the evidence says. And what we don't want to do is apply solutions that don't have any basis for success. And so from the perspective of our government, one of the key components to success is actually understanding what people are doing at the grassroots, how they're identifying problems, and what solutions that they're trying to implement, and then supporting and boosting that work across the country. And so I have always worked with community, and I'm so thrilled to be able to continue to do that at this level.
But on the enforcement side of it, police, we hear sometimes from victims they don't empathize, and they have limited resources. They can't track people who are at the source of this harassment. How do you empower police to do more?
Well, Well, one of the things that I'm extremely grateful about is that the mandates of all of the ministers are somewhat interwoven. So I'm very able to work very closely with the Minister of Safety, for example, public safety. I've met with, Commissioner Bob Paulson to talk about issues within the force and outside of the force that either hamper their ability to support women that are experiencing violence or support it. So I think, there are things that we can do from within government. I think there are certainly things that we can do to support women that are looking for those resources at the community level. But I think one of the things that it's going to take is a conversation nationally, which is part of this consultation process, is actually having these conversations on shows just like yours across the country from coast to coast to coast about the fact that this violence does exist, that women are more vulnerable, and that we all have a responsibility to address this and bring it out of the shadows, if you will.
What message would you have for any trolls out there?
Well, the message, for the trolls out there is that this is not a benign activity. Your behavior has consequences. It hurts people. It disempowers people at the very least, and at the very most, what it does is it actually creates fear and anxiety. Perhaps that's the goal. Certainly, my message is that it's not enhancing civil society at all, and that we will be looking for solutions to end that behavior.
And what about the concerns that you're going after free speech?
I think from my perspective, again, my goal is to actually create safe spaces for women and girls across the country. So however we do that, it will be with the full respect for free speech, but understanding that speech has consequences. I mean, nobody said that free speech means that there are no consequences to our speech. We absolutely have free speech, but what happens after we speak, that has always been a tenet of our country. In fact, I think sometimes we use free speech as a sort of a veil, if you will, to hide the fact that our speech often has consequences, whether we're talking in our personal relationships or at a national level.
Minister Hajdu, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the time.
Patty Hajdu is the Minister for the Status of Women. So we are asking, when, in your experience, has online harassment happened or online comments gone too far? 1-888-817-8995. And we go now to the lines to Frida. Good afternoon, Frida.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to say that it's not so much just internet behavior. It's societal behavior. People are willing to say things on the internet. They feel it's anonymous, that they would never express to anyone. A good example actually is the organization that I'm listening to right now, the CBC, who decided to take away all comments for any Aboriginal story. And the sad truth is the reason why that was done was because people were leaving comments that they would never say to another human being.
Right, but
so what we're talking about is really societal behavior. People behave this way. It's like trying to legislate kindness in an unkind world.
Well, I mean,
until the culture changes, it won't change.
Well, what do you do?
That's a good question. As far as legislation goes, I wish them luck trying to find people to find the person who is sending those horrific comments to another individual. Oftentimes, they're professional trolls. They're not findable, which is why the police are at sort of at a loose end. For example, it's taken years to find things like child pedophiles out there. It's taken them years to track down who that person is. And someone who's just sitting there at 2 o'clock in the morning feeling all cranky, seeing a post by a beautiful woman or a wonderful man or what have you, and they send something that's absolutely derogatory and nasty. I don't know how, unless people understand that this is a real form of communication and that people actually receive these messages. It's not a joke.
Okay, Frida, thank you very much for that. And Julie, I want to we're societal issue, as Frida mentions, and I asked the minister, what would you tell the trolls? I want to ask you kind of the same question, but not so much the trolls who are active right now. What would you say to a young person out there, any age for that matter, who's maybe never engaged in that kind of behavior, Right, but is maybe just about to write something that crosses the line from an insult that's fair game to something that is really an attack on the person and it's racist, sexist. But they haven't done it yet. They're about to do. What would you tell them?
I want to believe that these people can see my humanity. So I would say to the person who's about to send a tweet telling me, for example, that I should kill myself, to think, my mother's going to read that, my dad's going to read that, my grandmother's going to read that, your own parents might read that, for example. Does that what you want to be as a reflection of yourself? And to treat every comment you make online in the sense of every comment you make online, if you were to put that on a billboard in the front of your house, would you be proud of what you just did? Because you need to stand by what you say in any context. I can't go to my job and just spew off insults to people consequence-free. And when we have this conversation about freedom of speech, people need to understand that victims also have a right to freedom of expression. And by not curbing hate speech, we're actually reducing access to freedom of expression, because we're telling that unless you're privileged, unless you're, whatever we decide is the privileged sense, that you don't have the right to speak. So we're actually minimizing people's access to freedom. We're actually saying that women, folks of color, queer folks, people with disabilities, they don't have a voice. So when we hear freedom of speech repeated over and over and over again, just be honest with what you're saying. Say, as a middle-aged white man, as a privileged guy, my right to freedom of speech trumps your own. Because every time you attack women and people of color online, you are minimizing their access to freedom of speech. And my rights are just as valuable as yours.
Corey in Almont is our next caller here on Ontario Today. Good afternoon, Corey.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. What's your angle on this?
Well, I guess my angle on this is, I'm a middle-aged white man myself. And, my online presence sort of stands at the intersection of a lot of these, exactly what we're talking about. So, Reddit, Imager, Twitter, that sort of thing. It's all really familiar. And I think what I want to say is that men should be talking to other men about this stuff. And the reason for that is, even though all of these excellent points made by these intelligent women who are speaking on your program are, every bit as worthy of being respected and listened to as they could possibly be, men sometimes, and the kind of men we're talking about in the context of this story, they program themselves to kind of shut it out, if you get what I mean. And so what I want to do is I want to urge other men to talk to other men, I guess, about these issues and say, this isn't really cool, and I don't support you, and you're not funny. And
have you tried that, Corey, online? Have you tried reaching out?
I have, actually. Yeah.
What's been the response?
It's mixed. Often it really depends. I mean, you got to use a lot of, you got to use a lot of judgment when it comes to stuff like that, and know when you're talking to a wall. But what I think is really important about saying that kind of stuff, even if you're talking to somebody who's not going to listen, is to remember that when you're talking online, you may be having what seems like or feels like a one-on-one conversation with another guy who's blowing you off, but there are probably 100 other people watching the conversation and not saying anything and picking up the dynamics. So, if I'm a male watching that conversation and seeing two males disagreeing over sort of the, I don't know what would be the right word, sort of the advisability of harassing or attacking women online, it's going to make me question stuff myself. And I think that that's a dialogue that has to happen between males as well as between males and females.
Corey, I really appreciate you calling. 1-888, thanks. 1-888-817-8995. Let's go to Will in London. Hello, Will.
Hi. How's it going?
I'm doing well. You're on Ontario Today. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I just see freedom of speech as a compromise. I don't say that what you are saying should be banned, and you don't say what I am saying should be banned, because otherwise, what if I felt that someone saying that something is hate speech is hate speech? How do we define that term? It isn't a term that can be defined, so it's just whoever has the power in the institutions that decides to make something a bannable speech and something else not.
Well,
so the only way to get around it is free speech.
What should be the bar? Because there is a criminal bar for that.
There is a criminal bar. I don't think that the hate speech laws are, for the most part, very useful. I think that something like death threats, like something actionable, like just what the United States has. I have no problem with the slander, libel, that kind of thing. But in terms of me someone's saying something that someone else doesn't like, where do you draw the line between that's an annoying comment and that's hate speech?
Okay, I'll keep you on the line, Will, and let's put that to Julie. What do you think of Will's comment?
I wonder if Will's been listening to this program, because when we're talking about someone, this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about people sending death threats. We're talking about people sending rape threats. And I want folks to be clear that we live in a country in which just last week or the week before, someone was arrested for threatening our prime minister on social media. So we took that seriously. Words that were probably you could copy and paste and have sent to other folks in this country that were not taken seriously. We also live in a province in which a man got a police showed up at his door because he made a tweet threatening the Ted Rogers statue, a statue. The police showed up at his house to threaten him for threatening a statue. So we live in a country in which we have this understanding that like some things go too far, but we don't apply it evenly. And to his point about who defines hate speech, the law defines hate speech, right? And so to once again reiterate that if you think that me disagreeing with you online, that I'm conflating that with someone sending me a death threat, that's on you. That's not what we're saying. That's not what Leslie Jones was saying. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what September Anderson said in her piece today for the CBC. We're talking about people who make detailed threats. We're talking about people who are, it's incessant. For a guy sent me an email every 2 days for 3 months telling me that I should die, telling me that I was a war criminal. Like, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about incessant deluges of harassment that's targeted, that's formed by a mob. And to revert all the time to this freedom of speech situation, that's actually an American ideal. In the United States, they prioritize freedom of speech over everything else. We live in Canada, where we actually prioritize our charter, human rights, and freedom of expression, which is actually different from freedom of speech.
Will, give you a chance to respond to Julie's answer.
Well, everything that you said can be covered by other laws besides hate speech laws. Like, harassment is a crime. Absolutely. Everyone agrees that harassment is a crime. Death threats are also a crime that doesn't fall under hate speech. These are already things that are covered by other things. So I don't know why you're trotting out hate speech as a limit to these things. If I walk up to you on the street and say I'm going to kill you, yeah, I'm going to get arrested for that. Like that doesn't mean that it's hate speech. It's harassment, or it's a death threat, or it's verbal assault. Like, there's a bunch of things that these are already covered. We don't need the additional category of hate speech, which is just speech that we don't like.
Okay, well, I want to thank you again for calling in with that angle. Let's go to Frank in Newcastle. Good afternoon, Frank. You're on Ontario Today.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you very much for having me. Now, with the gentleman who was just on the line there, he said something to the effect of, we call it hate speech because we don't like it. Now, I want to flip that back at him. Now, is it only hate speech because it doesn't happen to him or his daughter or his family members? That's something he can answer on his own time. But, yes, the government does need to step in. Have I been a victim of it? Yes, I have, right? This happened to me when I tried to engage people who are supporting the rebel flag. I see it flying here in the GTA, outside the GTA, I should say, more often than I'd like to see, but that's their right, right? So do we need to become like China and monitor the internet like that? No, but I think it boils down to respect, something that has gone far outside the window in today's society. If we had respect for one another, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
All right. Thank you, Frank. And our next call comes from Toronto. Good afternoon, Glenn. You're on Ontario Today.
Good afternoon. I'm Rapea Parsons' dad. My daughter was cyberbullied, and it contributed an awful lot to ending her life. And I wanted to address a comment made by a male caller earlier on where he started to bring up issues of free speech, human rights, the Constitution, things like that. And I think it's really being overlooked when people start talking about free speech online. They fail completely to forget that every platform online has the terms and conditions that you have to agree to when you sign up. I know that Twitter has one, Facebook does, Google does, and they all are very, very clear that you agree you're not going to use this platform to harass people. It's not a free speech issue. This is a company. It's a corporation. They make the rules. You agree to them. And if you're not willing to follow them, then you have absolutely no argument at all that you have some kind of a right to say and do whatever you want to.
Is that enough, do you think? Or because we've seen that those comments can live for a long time there?
they can live for a long time. I'm just trying to address really the issue of whether or not online harassment is somehow protected by free speech. It's just not. There is nothing that would ever come in conflict with free speech on the internet, on a platform that says, you're not allowed to use this platform to harass people. And a lot of them have taken an awful lot of action. They can just ban whoever they feel violates those terms and conditions. People get kicked off Facebook all the time. People have been, the Leslie Jones thing, they had the reporter kicked off of Twitter, and people will be like, oh, this is a violation of free speech. Absolutely it's not. It's a violation of terms and conditions people agreed to when they started tweeting.
Glenn, what do you think the government should do in this? What more can they do?
Well, I read something recently with police officers in the United States where after a lot of shootings, then people come out with threats online. And the police officers, this tweet was basically the police officers all over America are now going after people who threaten them online, so they can actually go after people who are threatening women online. And that's what I think we need to do. We need to be very clear that what happens online is exactly the same as it happens offline. You wouldn't start calling somebody with a telephone saying, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you over and over again, or call someone every couple of days like happened with Julie, saying the same kind of things like people seem to think they can do on Twitter. We need better acknowledgement of that this is a huge problem, and we need police officers and we need the police forces, I think, to start getting involved with prosecuting people for this. It's not going to go away unless we start arresting people and charging them for harassment.
Glenn, I want to thank you very much for calling in the show today.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
We got time for one more call. Erica in Thunder Bay, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call.
Go ahead.
So I have been a victim of hate speech, not just through the phone or in an impersonal setting, but actually face-to-face. I was waiting to get into the library at the school, and there were about 50 other people waiting, and the librarian came in, and she opened the doors just to let herself in to, turn the power on and everything. And there's this white guy standing there, and he says, "Can't you just let us in?" And she said, "No, I can't." And she was there before the library was due to open, so really she wasn't making anybody late so far as getting to the library and doing their studying or whatever they wanted to do. And then he proceeded to verbally assault her using words that start with F and B.
I appreciate your story. We're almost at the end of what did you intervene?
I did intervene. He proceeded with this, and no one else stood up. I intervened, and then he started to verbally attack me. And
Okay, I'm going to hold you there. I'm going to hold you there, Erica, because we are out of time. Final thoughts, Julie?
I want to go back to what Erica just said and to what Corey from Almont said. I want to thank him for calling in and talking about men engaging other men. And so that to me, I work as a public educator. And so if this is an issue that you're concerned about, that you are hearing this and you're saying, I've witnessed this kind of behavior, or as he said, I'm a guy and I see other guys, let's call each other out and be a good bystander.
Thank you very much, Julie, for joining us this hour. And Julie Lalonde is the founder of Draw the Line and also Hollaback Ottawa. And that is our show. If you're looking for a podcast of this show, you'll find a link on our website, cbc.ca/Ontario Today. Tomorrow, what woke you up to a bad credit score? Our guest is money advisor Rubina Ahmed Huck. I'm Giacomo Panico, sitting in for Rita Celli here on Ontario Today. Have yourself a great afternoon. Take care.